The silent watcher. The sun had barely crept above the horizon, casting a soft, golden hue across the skyline. The bustling city streets slowly began to stir as people started their daily routines, heading to work, meetings, and appointments. In the heart of the financial district stood a towering office building, its gleaming glass windows reflecting the morning light. The building was a symbol of success, a marvel of modern architecture that housed some of the most influential companies in the country. But beneath the polished exterior, there was a quiet, unnoticed force who made it all possible, a force that few even realized was behind the scenes. Clara Jennings moved through the grand lobby of her own creation, her cleaning cart gliding smoothly across the marble floor. She wasn't wearing the expensive suits that the other executives wore, nor was she adorned with the accessories that define the upper echelons of corporate power. Instead, she wore a simple janitor's uniform, a faded blue shirt with her name embroidered on the chest, and dark pants that had seen their fair share of hard work. Her hair was tied back in a neat ponytail, and her eyes, sharp and observant, were focused on the task at hand. To most, Clara was just another face in the crowd, the kind of person who blended into the background, invisible to those who passed her by, too focused on their own importance to even glance at the person who kept the building clean. They didn't know that Clara was the one who owned this building, the one who had built a multi-million-dollar company from the ground up. Jennings Industries wasn't just her business, it was her life's work, and every inch of success had been earned through grit, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to integrity. But Clara believed in one principle above all else. Leadership wasn't about titles or power. It was about connection. She wanted to know how her employees treated one another, especially those who were seen as beneath them. So a few days each month, Clara would quietly slip into the building before dawn, dressed as a janitor, and spend the day cleaning and observing. She wanted to see how the office staff behaved when they thought no one was watching. Did they treat everyone with respect? Or did they look down on the support staff, janitors, receptionists, assistants, as though they were less than human? Today, Clara's attention was fixed on one particular employee, Bradley Carter. He was the office manager, a man in his late 40s with a reputation for being cold, aloof, and quick to judge others. Bradley held power in the office, and Clara had heard whispers about his interactions with the support staff. They weren't flattering. He had a reputation for belittling those he considered beneath him, and his condescending attitude had been a subject of office gossip for months. It was time for Clara to see it for herself. As she moved her cart down the hallway, her mind already calculating the best route to take for the most thorough observations, Bradley came into view. He was striding down the hall with purpose, his steps quick and deliberate. He was dressed in a tailored suit, his tie sharp and neatly arranged, a perfect reflection of the power he wielded in the office. His phone was pressed to his ear, and his voice carried through the corridor, sharp and impatient as he barked orders to someone on the other end of the line. Clara didn't break her rhythm. She continued sweeping the floor, her movements smooth and precise, all while keeping her eyes trained on Bradley. As he neared, his gaze shifted briefly in her direction, but he didn't even slow down. In fact, he glanced at her for only a moment before sneering and muttering something under his breath. His words were drowned out by the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead, but the disdain in his voice was unmistakable. "Move that cart out of the way," he snapped, his tone as sharp as the crease in his trousers. "Some of us have real work to do." Clara didn't flinch. She didn't need to. She simply stepped aside and continued cleaning, her back straight and her expression calm. Bradley didn't even look back. He just kept walking, his shoes clicking against the floor as he made his way toward the next task. But Clara's mind was racing. She had already seen enough. Bradley's behavior wasn't just rude, it was toxic. His disregard for the people who worked in the building, the people who made everything run smoothly, was unacceptable. But Clara wasn't in a hurry to confront him. Not yet. She had a plan, and it would require patience. As the morning wore on, Clara continued her work, moving through the building with quiet determination. She cleaned windows, mopped floors, and polished surfaces, all the while keeping a careful eye on Bradley. The more she observed, the more the pieces of his character began to fall into place. He was ruthless, dismissive, and quick to judge anyone he considered below him in the office hierarchy. His sharp words echoed through the halls, and his presence seemed to leave a trail of discomfort in his wake. When Bradley walked past Clara again, he didn't slow down. His eyes didn't even flicker in her direction, and his scowl deepened as he noticed the cart still in the hallway. He wasn't bothered by the fact that Clara was still there. It was the fact that she was taking her time and doing her job with attention to detail. In his mind, that wasn't something that deserved respect. He had a point to prove, and in his world, time was money. "Are you still here?" Bradley asked, his voice dripping with condescension. "It's been hours, and you're still in the same spot. How hard is it to mop a floor?" Clara didn't respond right away. She simply finished wiping the window in front of her, her movements slow and deliberate. She knew Bradley's type, people who used their position to put others down. But she also knew that it was only a matter of time before he dug his own grave. And she would be there, watching it all unfold. Finally, Clara turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "I'm just doing my job," she said, her voice soft but firm. Bradley scoffed. "Well, maybe you should pick up the pace. Some of us have deadlines to meet," he sneered, as if his work were somehow more important than hers. Clara didn't flinch. She simply stared at him, her gaze steady and unwavering. The tension between them hung in the air, thick and heavy. Bradley seemed to revel in the power he had over her, the way he could make her feel small with just a few words. But Clara had seen enough. She had seen the cracks in his facade, and she knew that this was just the beginning. What Bradley didn't realize was that he was being watched, not just by Clara, but by everyone around him. As Bradley walked away, his smug expression still on his face, Clara continued her work. She had made a mental note of everything. His words, his behavior, the way he treated others. She wasn't the type to act on impulse, but Clara Jennings had always believed in justice, and she was determined to make sure that Bradley learned a lesson he wouldn't soon forget. Little did he know, the real work was about to begin. The tipping point. The day dragged on as Clara moved through the building, methodically doing her work, cleaning spaces that would soon be filled with the hum of office workers, buzzing phones, and the click of keyboards. She didn't mind the solitude. In fact, she cherished it. It was during these hours, when the building was still asleep, that she could think clearly. The calm allowed her to plan, to make decisions that would shape the future of her company. But today, her thoughts kept drifting back to Bradley Carter. His condescending attitude had struck a nerve. Clara had seen all types of behavior throughout the years. As the founder of Jennings Industries, she had built a company from scratch, and in doing so, had encountered her fair share of egos, entitled individuals, and office politics. But Bradley was something else. His arrogance wasn't just about power. It was about disdain. He made it clear that anyone who wasn't in his circle was beneath him. And it wasn't just Clara who felt the sting of his words. His treatment of the support staff was the talk of the office, though no one dared to speak up. They were too afraid of the repercussions. The more Clara thought about it, the more disgusted she became. The leader in her eyes was someone who inspired respect, not fear. The respect you earned wasn't based on your position, but on how you treated others, especially those who couldn't do anything for you in return. But Bradley had missed that lesson. He saw his staff, especially those at the bottom of the office hierarchy, as tools to get his job done. His insults had gone unchecked for far too long. Clara had decided that it was time to put an end to it, not just for herself, but for everyone who had been subjected to Bradley's toxic behavior. As the hours passed, Clara's resolve only grew stronger. She had already made up her mind. After observing his behavior for most of the day, she knew it was time to take action. But she wouldn't do it in the way anyone might expect. She would do it quietly. The best lessons were the ones that came from experience, and Clara intended to make sure that Bradley would learn the lesson of his life. It wasn't long before Clara's opportunity arrived. The clock ticked toward lunchtime, and the office began to stir. People were finishing their morning work and making their way toward the break room or heading out to grab lunch. The usual noise of chatter and laughter filled the air, but Clara remained focused. She was near the break room when Bradley appeared again, this time with a few of his colleagues in tow. He was laughing loudly, his voice carrying across the room as he mocked someone on the phone, his words sharp and biting. Clara, now standing by the hallway, turned slightly to keep an eye on the group. As she pretended to wipe down the nearby walls, she overheard Bradley's voice, rising above the others. His tone was the same as before, disrespectful and callous. "Can you believe the janitor still hasn't finished that hallway?" Bradley sneered, his words meant to carry across the room. "How hard is it to mop a floor? Honestly, I could do a better job with my eyes closed. This is the kind of thing that happens when you hire people who don't know what they're doing." Clara's jaw tightened at the words. She had heard the whispers in the halls, but hearing Bradley say them so loudly, as if his words were gospel, stirred something deeper inside her. It was one thing to treat her like this, but to involve others in his mockery. That crossed a line. She stood still for a moment, her back straight, her face composed. Then, with a deep breath, she turned and continued to push her cleaning cart down the hallway, making her way toward the elevator. She had made her decision. There was no turning back now. It was time to put her plan into motion. Clara knew exactly how she was going to approach this. She wasn't going to confront Bradley directly. She wasn't going to have some dramatic showdown in front of the whole office. Instead, she was going to use the one thing Bradley couldn't anticipate: his own pride. By the time Bradley had finished his mocking, Clara had already made her way upstairs to her office. It was hidden away on the top floor, a corner suite with glass walls that offered a sweeping view of the city below. She had designed it to be a sanctuary, simple but elegant, and right now it was where she would remain hidden, while the events she set in motion would unfold. Clara settled behind her desk, her fingers grazing the sleek surface as she reached for the intercom. She'd been running Jennings Industries for decades, and she had learned long ago that true leadership wasn't about exerting power, it was about listening. She had always listened to her employees, but this was different. Today, she wasn't just listening as the founder of the company. She was listening as someone who had been underestimated and mistreated by a man who thought his position could shield him from consequences. Clara picked up the phone and dialed the main office number. Within seconds, the secretary's voice greeted her. "Good afternoon, Ms. Jennings," the receptionist said, her voice cheerful and professional. "Hello, Carol," Clara replied, keeping her voice calm and steady. "I need you to send out an all-staff meeting invitation for 3:00 p.m. today. Make it mandatory, and let everyone know that it will be important for all employees to attend. No excuses." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. Clara knew Carol was curious, but she also knew that Carol wouldn't question her. The secretary had worked with Clara for years and had seen firsthand the kind of leader she was. She trusted her. "Of course, Ms. Jennings. I'll take care of it right away." "Thank you," Clara said, her tone final. She hung up the phone, leaning back in her chair. Now, it was just a matter of waiting. The office staff slowly began to gather in the large conference room just before 3:00 p.m. Whispers filled the room as people wondered what the meeting was about. Some speculated that it might be about a new project, while others thought it could be about upcoming layoffs. But no one could have predicted what was about to happen. At exactly 3:00, the door to the conference room swung open, and Clara Jennings walked in. Her entrance was deliberate, calm, composed, and filled with purpose. The room fell silent, and every head turned toward her. It wasn't a grand entrance, but it was one that commanded attention. Clara stood at the front of the room, her back straight, her expression unreadable. She waited for the murmurs to die down before speaking. "Good afternoon, everyone," she began, her voice clear and firm. "I'm sure you're all wondering why I've called you here today. Some of you may have heard rumors about this meeting. Let me make one thing clear. This isn't about new projects. It's not about layoffs. It's about something far more important, the culture we cultivate here at Jennings Industries." The room grew even quieter, the tension palpable. Clara paused, allowing her words to sink in. "I've spent a lot of time building this company," Clara continued, "and for years I've trusted all of you to carry it forward. But trust, respect, and integrity are the cornerstones of any great organization. And today, I'm here to remind you that those values must extend to every level of our business, no matter what title you hold, no matter how much money you make." Clara paused again, scanning the room. Her eyes briefly met Bradley's, who was standing near the back, his face flushed with confusion and discomfort. The corner of Clara's lips curled slightly, but it wasn't a smile. "Some of you may have forgotten that," she said, her voice dropping just low enough for Bradley to hear. "But I'm here to remind you, and I promise you, you will learn the lesson well." With that, she stepped aside, signaling for the next part of her plan to unfold. Bradley's fate, and the fate of those who followed his toxic example, was now sealed. The unraveling. The tension in the room was palpable. Clara could feel the weight of every eye on her, the collective curiosity and unease hanging thick in the air. She had made her point with her opening words, but now came the hard part. She needed to make sure the lesson was unforgettable, one that would resonate with everyone in the room, especially Bradley. Clara stepped away from the podium, pacing slowly as she spoke. Her calm demeanor remained, but her words were sharp, measured, and full of intent. "Respect is not a commodity," Clara began, her voice steady, but carrying a weight that demanded attention. "It's not something that can be bought, sold, or earned through titles. It's something that we all give and receive equally. The moment any of us forgets that, the moment any of us starts thinking that we are better than another, is the moment we begin to lose what makes us human. And it's the moment that our company begins to falter." Clara paused, taking a breath as she watched the room carefully. Bradley was standing in the back, his arms crossed, his face a mask of confusion and discomfort. Clara could see the shifting of his eyes as he tried to make sense of the situation. But Clara was ready for him. This was the moment she had been preparing for. She took another slow step toward the front of the room and looked directly at Bradley. Her gaze was unwavering, the silence between them growing thick with meaning. "Bradley," she said, her voice crisp, "would you please come to the front?" The words hung in the air for a split second before Bradley moved, albeit slowly, towards the front of the room. He didn't know exactly what was going on, but his face betrayed a mixture of disbelief and irritation. He still wasn't sure if this was some sort of joke or an elaborate prank. He certainly didn't believe for a second that the janitor, who, as he thought of her, was just a lowly cleaning woman, was the CEO of the entire company. As Bradley made his way to the front, Clara motioned for him to stand beside her. He obeyed reluctantly, his body tense, the crowd now watching every move with rapt attention. Clara gave him a slight nod, as if to reassure him that she was not about to tear him apart. At least, not yet. Her expression softened slightly, though her tone remained firm. "I've observed your behavior over the past few days, Bradley," she said, the words sinking in. "And I'm not just talking about how you treat the janitors or the lower-level staff, but your attitude toward the entire company. The way you belittle people, the way you mock those you consider beneath you. That's not leadership, and it's certainly not the culture we foster at Jennings Industries." Bradley stiffened, his face growing red as Clara continued. "I wanted to see for myself how you treat others. I wanted to see if you truly understood the value of respect. But now, I realize that you don't. You don't understand what it means to be a leader, and I'm afraid you never will." There was a pause, as if the weight of Clara's words were just beginning to land. Bradley's mouth opened, but no words came out. His eyes darted around the room, looking for some sign of solidarity from the others. But he was met with silence. No one dared speak up. Not a single person in the room, from the junior assistants to the senior managers, was willing to step forward to defend him. It was clear that the majority had grown tired of his behavior, even if they had been too afraid to confront him themselves. Clara took a deliberate step back, glancing around the room. "What you fail to realize, Bradley," she continued, her voice low but resonant, "is that no one is above the people they work with. You may sit in that office, make decisions, and bark orders, but without the support of the people who do the day-to-day work, none of it matters. You're nothing without them." Bradley's face contorted with rage, but Clara wasn't finished. She wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of reacting. Instead, she kept her gaze steady, her words deliberate and sharp. "I'm afraid I've seen enough," she said. "Bradley Carter, you are fired." The words landed like a slap in the face. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Bradley's mouth hung open, his eyes wide with disbelief. "What?" He spat, unable to comprehend the words. "You can't be serious." Clara raised her hand, silencing him. "I'm very serious, Bradley. And this isn't just about your treatment of the staff, although that alone is enough. It's about the way you represent this company. We are a team here at Jennings Industries, a team built on trust, respect, and mutual support. You've failed to embody those values, and I can't, in good conscience, allow someone like you to remain in charge." The room was still, everyone watching the interaction unfold. Bradley stood there, stunned, unable to formulate a coherent response. His body was stiff, his anger barely contained. He wanted to lash out, but he knew that doing so would only make him look more foolish. The truth was, Clara had the power to do this. He was powerless here. But Clara wasn't finished. "You see," Clara continued, her tone now softer but no less resolute, "I didn't want to come to this conclusion. I didn't want to have to make a public example of you, but I've seen too many employees, too many good people, suffer because of your arrogance and disrespect. I can't allow that to continue." She turned to the rest of the room. "To everyone else in this company, I want you to know that this decision was not made lightly. I've always believed that our company's success is built on a foundation of respect for one another. And if any of you ever think that you can mistreat someone because of their role, or because you think they are beneath you, know that you will face the consequences." Clara let the words hang in the air for a moment before turning back to Bradley. "I think it's time for you to leave. Now." Bradley opened his mouth again, but no words came. He looked around the room, as if waiting for someone to come to his defense. But no one did. His colleagues, once fearful of him, now stood silent, some with their heads down, others with their arms crossed. They had witnessed enough. With a final, furious glare, Bradley turned and stormed out of the room, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. Clara watched him go, feeling no satisfaction in his departure. This wasn't about revenge. This was about justice, about making sure the culture of respect was protected, no matter who it was. As the door slammed behind Bradley, Clara turned back to the room, meeting the eyes of her employees. "Let this be a lesson to all of you," she said, her voice firm and resolute. "We are a family here at Jennings Industries, and in this family, there is no room for disrespect. If you want to succeed here, you will do so by treating everyone, no matter their position or role, with kindness, dignity, and respect." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "Now, I want you all to go back to your work. Let's keep building this company with the values that matter, together." The employees slowly began to leave the room, their expressions a mix of awe and relief. They had witnessed something extraordinary. A CEO who wasn't afraid to do what was right, no matter the cost. And they would remember this day for the rest of their careers. It wasn't just about the firing. It was about a new standard being set. And they all knew that, moving forward, the culture of Jennings Industries had been forever changed. The aftermath. The days following Bradley's departure were some of the most turbulent but transformative in the history of Jennings Industries. Word of his sudden firing spread like wildfire through the office building. The once untouchable office manager, known for his sharp tongue and abrasive attitude, had been publicly removed from his position with a single firm decision by the very person he had disrespected, the CEO herself. The staff were left in a mix of disbelief, relief, and anticipation. What would happen next? Clara Jennings, meanwhile, remained resolute and calm, despite the waves of emotion crashing around her. Her decision had been swift and final, but the consequences were far-reaching, and she knew that the road ahead would not be without challenges. The company needed time to process what had happened. The employees, especially those who had witnessed Bradley's behavior firsthand, needed to feel the weight of her actions in a way that would instill lasting change. And Clara knew that this would take more than just one firing. The first meeting of the week after Bradley's exit was an unusual one. Clara had called an all-hands meeting in the main conference room, a large, sleek space with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city skyline. The employees, especially those who had witnessed Bradley's behavior firsthand, needed to feel the weight of her actions in a way that would instill lasting change. And Clara knew that this would take more than just one firing. The first meeting of the week after Bradley's exit was an unusual one. Clara had called an all-hands meeting in the main conference room, a large, sleek space with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city skyline. The employees trickled in slowly, some looking more nervous than others. For many of them, this was the first time they had seen their CEO in such a direct, personal way. As they settled into their seats, Clara stood at the front of the room, her presence commanding attention, her gaze firm but not unkind. She had seen the fear in the eyes of her employees when Bradley's toxic leadership had ruled the office, and now she was ready to rebuild what had been damaged. "Good morning, everyone," Clara began, her voice carrying through the room. "I know that last week's events were unexpected, and for some of you, unsettling. Bradley Carter's firing was not something I ever hoped would be necessary. But in light of his behavior and the environment he fostered, it was the only decision I could make." She paused for a moment, her eyes scanning the room. She could feel the weight of their gazes on her, but she did not look away. She wasn't going to apologize for doing what was right. Instead, she was going to help them understand why it had to happen. "The truth is," Clara continued, "when I started Jennings Industries, I made a commitment to myself and to each of you. I wanted to build a company where people are valued for who they are, not what position they hold. A company where respect is given freely and where every person, whether they clean the floors or lead the teams, is treated with dignity." The room was silent. Clara could tell that some employees were still trying to process everything, unsure of where this conversation would lead. But she wasn't going to back down now. "Over the last few months," Clara went on, her voice unwavering, "I've noticed a shift in the company culture. It wasn't something that happened overnight, but it was there, gradually growing. The lack of respect, the toxic behavior. And I've seen it in the way some of you have treated each other. In the way people like Bradley, who were given authority, used it to belittle others. I couldn't let that go on any longer." There was a ripple of acknowledgement throughout the room, and Clara knew that she had hit the mark. Employees who had remained silent for months, some of them for years, were now nodding quietly. This was the change they had been longing for, the change they hadn't known how to ask for. But Clara continued, firing Bradley wasn't the solution. It was a necessary step, yes, but it was also just the beginning of a larger transformation, one that involves all of us, every single person in this company. We need to rebuild the trust that has been eroded, and we need to cultivate an environment where no one is made to feel less than. It starts with every single one of us. Clara's words hit hard, but they were met with understanding, even agreement. She had struck a nerve. Her vision for Jennings Industries wasn't just about profits and growth. It was about creating a workplace where every employee could thrive, feel heard, and be respected for their contributions. I will be spending the next few weeks meeting with each department, Clara announced. I want to hear from you. I want to know what's been working, what hasn't, and how we can all move forward together. It's time for a new chapter here, one built on respect, transparency, and collaboration. For the first time in a long while, Clara saw something in the eyes of her employees that had been missing for far too long. Hope. It was a subtle shift, but it was there. They weren't just looking at her with uncertainty anymore. Now they were looking at her with a renewed sense of possibility. As the meeting ended, employees filed out of the conference room, talking quietly among themselves. The atmosphere was different, lighter. People felt empowered. Clara had done more than just remove an oppressive figure from the company. She had given her employees a voice. She had reminded them that they mattered, no matter their title or their position. Over the next few weeks, Clara immersed herself in the company. She spent time walking the halls, visiting departments, talking with employees at every level of the organization. She held open forums where people could share their experiences, their ideas, and their concerns. She made it clear that she was not interested in maintaining a hierarchy of power and distance between herself and her staff. She wanted to listen, to understand, and to make things better for everyone. It was during one of these forums that Clara received a surprising, yet telling, message. One afternoon, Clara sat in the break room, enjoying a rare moment of peace as she sipped her coffee. A young assistant named Elena, who had been with the company for just a few months, approached her cautiously. I just wanted to thank you, Elena said, her voice soft but sincere, for what you did with Bradley. I don't think anyone has ever stood up to him like that. I've seen so many people here just put up with his behavior, and I never knew what to do. But what you did was right, Clara finished for her, giving her a small smile. Elena nodded, her eyes shining with a mixture of admiration and gratitude. Yes, it was right. It gave us all the courage to speak up, to know that someone cares. Clara didn't say anything in response for a moment. She simply took in Elena's words, her chest swelling with quiet pride. This was the change she had hoped for, a ripple effect of courage and empowerment that would spread throughout the company. But it wasn't just about removing Bradley from the equation. It was about reminding everyone that they were important, that they had a voice that deserved to be heard. As the weeks turned into months, Clara continued to foster the new culture she had envisioned. Her actions had shaken the foundations of the company, but they had also set something in motion, something that couldn't be undone. The employees of Jennings Industries began to stand taller, to speak more openly, and to treat one another with more respect. And slowly, the company's productivity and morale improved as well. Clara had always known that the heart of any successful organization was its people. She had built Jennings Industries with that philosophy in mind, and she had just begun to rebuild it with that same belief. And with each passing day, she could feel the company transforming into the place she had always dreamed it could be. And as for Bradley, well, that was another story. His actions had caught up with him, and he would soon find that the world he had built on arrogance and manipulation would come crumbling down, piece by piece. The company he had once tried to control would continue to thrive without him. But for Clara Jennings, the journey had just begun. She had faced a challenge that many CEOs would have run from, and in doing so, she had reminded everyone at Jennings Industries of one important truth: respect is the foundation of everything. Without it, nothing else truly matters. The true test of leadership. Months passed after the reshaping of Jennings Industries, but the transformation was far from over. Clara's actions had certainly changed the landscape of the company, but a deep and lasting shift in culture takes time. As the dust settled from the initial shock of Bradley Carter's dismissal, Clara understood that the real test of her leadership was yet to come. The positive changes she had instilled were only the beginning. Now she needed to ensure that they were embedded into the very DNA of the company. Every employee, from the interns to the senior management, needed to feel empowered, supported, and heard. It wasn't just about building an organization. It was about creating a community. One of the first initiatives Clara implemented was a formalized feedback system. She wanted to hear from her employees regularly, not just about what was working or what wasn't, but about how they were feeling in their roles. She wanted to create an environment where constructive criticism wasn't feared, but welcomed. She knew that to avoid falling into old patterns of fear and hierarchy, she needed to be accessible, open, and present. The feedback forms became a monthly ritual. At first, the responses were cautious. Employees were hesitant, unsure whether their voices would truly make a difference. But Clara knew that building trust wasn't an overnight process. It took time, consistency, and visible actions. As she read through the feedback, Clara took note of common themes. One of the most frequent concerns was communication, or rather, the lack of it. Employees often complained that important decisions were made without their input, that leadership seemed distant, and that they had no real idea of where the company was heading. This was her moment. Clara called for another company-wide meeting, but this time, it would be different. Instead of holding a formal conference, she organized an open town hall where employees could speak freely. No agenda, no time limits, just an honest, open conversation between Clara and the staff. On the day of the town hall, Clara stood at the front of the room, her demeanor as calm as ever, but inside, she felt a wave of nervousness. This wasn't just about speaking to her employees, it was about listening to them. She had already taken the first step in addressing their concerns, but now she needed to show them that she was committed to seeing this through. She needed to show them that this wasn't just a phase. "Good afternoon, everyone," Clara began, her voice steady but warm. "I'm glad to see so many of you here today. I know this isn't a typical company meeting, but I wanted to create a space where we could talk openly. No barriers, no hierarchy, just a conversation." A few employees exchanged nervous glances, but Clara noticed that the room was filled with a palpable sense of anticipation. She had already proven that she was willing to take bold actions, but now she needed to prove that she was genuinely interested in their thoughts and concerns. "For the past few months, I've been reading your feedback, and I've heard many of you. You've shared some great ideas, but also some important challenges that we need to address. One of the recurring themes has been communication, both internally and from leadership. I've heard that many of you feel out of the loop or unsure about where the company is heading, and that's something we can improve together." She paused for a moment, letting the weight of her words sink in. "I want you to know that I'm not here to tell you what to think or how to feel. I'm here to listen. So let's have a conversation. What's working? What's not? And how can we, as a company, do better?" There was a slight rustle in the room as people shifted in their seats. Clara could feel the tension ease a little as employees began to realize that this wasn't a trap, it was an opportunity. One by one, hands went up, and Clara nodded toward the first speaker. A young marketing associate, Natalie, stood up. She looked slightly nervous but determined. "I think the biggest issue we have is transparency. Sometimes, we're working on projects and feel like we're left in the dark about the bigger picture. It's like we don't know how our individual tasks contribute to the company's overall goals. If we understood that better, I think we feel more connected to the mission." Clara nodded thoughtfully. "Thank you, Natalie. That's incredibly valuable feedback. I agree, and that's something we need to work on. The link between individual contributions and the broader company vision is crucial. We can do better at communicating our goals more clearly and making sure everyone feels connected to the bigger picture." Another hand shot up. It was Michael, a longtime senior manager in the IT department. "I think, for some of us, there's also a lack of recognition. We work long hours, take on additional responsibilities, but sometimes it feels like that effort goes unnoticed." Clara's heart tightened at this response. She had been so focused on the cultural changes that she hadn't fully realized the extent to which some employees felt underappreciated. "I hear you, Michael," Clara said, her voice firm. "And you're absolutely right. Recognition is essential. We will be implementing a new system of acknowledgement, where employees are regularly celebrated for their hard work. This won't just be about big achievements. It'll be about recognizing the everyday contributions that keep this company moving forward. The meeting continued, with employees sharing their concerns, suggestions, and observations. Clara listened intently, her mind whirring as she mentally took notes on the areas that needed attention. But there was one theme that emerged that particularly stood out to her: burnout. Several employees, particularly those in higher pressure roles, spoke about the toll their jobs were taking on their mental and physical health. They felt overwhelmed, under-resourced, and unsure of how to manage their workloads. "I've seen the pressure some of you have been under," Clara said, her voice softer now. "And I want to acknowledge that. Burnout is something we can no longer ignore. We will be rolling out new wellness initiatives. Things like flexible working hours, mental health days, and support for work-life balance. No one should feel like they have to sacrifice their well-being for their job." The room was silent for a moment, the weight of Clara's words hanging in the air. For many employees, hearing the CEO speak so openly about mental health was a turning point. It was an acknowledgement that their struggles were real, that their well-being mattered just as much as the company's bottom line. Clara wasn't just listening to them. She was showing them that she cared. As the town hall came to a close, Clara looked around the room at her employees. She saw their faces, some skeptical, some hopeful, but all engaged. She had taken the first step in rebuilding trust, but now the real work would begin. She needed to ensure that these changes were more than just promises. They needed to be lived out every day. Over the next few months, Clara made good on her commitments. Transparency became a core value at Jennings Industries, with regular updates from leadership and open forums where employees could voice their concerns. The wellness initiatives were rolled out with great success, and burnout levels began to decrease as employees felt more supported. Recognition programs were put in place, and the company began to see a shift in morale. People weren't just working for a paycheck anymore. They were working for a cause they believed in, a company that valued them as individuals. But the true test of Clara's leadership would come when the company faced its first major crisis since the transformation began. A new competitor entered the market, threatening to upend Jennings Industries' position in the industry. It was a challenge unlike any they had faced before. Would the company's newfound culture withstand the pressure? Could they hold on to their values while fighting for survival in a cutthroat market? Clara wasn't sure what the answer would be, but she knew one thing. If Jennings Industries was going to make it through, it wouldn't be because of the decisions of one person. It would be because of the collective strength, resilience, and unity of every single employee. And that, Clara believed, was the greatest asset any company could have. As the company prepared to face the storm ahead, Clara felt a quiet confidence. She had done more than rebuild Jennings Industries. She had transformed it into something stronger, something that could weather any challenge as long as they remained true to their core values. Now, the real work began. But for Clara, it was a challenge she was ready to meet head-on. The ultimate challenge. The weeks following the competitor's aggressive market entry were like nothing Clara had ever experienced in her career. It wasn't just about beating back a rival. It was a battle for the very identity of Jennings Industries. For years, Clara had been known for her innovative approach, her commitment to values, and her focus on empowering employees. But now, with the company's future hanging in the balance, those ideals were being tested like never before. Would the culture she had worked so hard to cultivate survive the fire of competition, or would it all crumble under the pressure? As soon as the news broke that the new competitor, Horizon Tech, was making rapid inroads in their sector, the atmosphere at Jennings Industries shifted. Sales teams, typically optimistic and energetic, were suddenly jittery. The marketing department, which had been thriving under Clara's leadership, started showing signs of panic. The executives who had once applauded her for her progressive, people-centered approach began whispering about more traditional, aggressive strategies. Some even suggested that the company should prioritize profits over people in order to survive. Clara could feel the tremor of doubt ripple through the company, and it weighed heavily on her. She understood the gravity of the situation, but she wasn't about to give in to fear or abandon the very values that had brought her this far. She had built Jennings Industries on a foundation of trust, transparency, and mutual respect. These values weren't just slogans, they were the lifeblood of the company. If Jennings was going to succeed, it had to do so by remaining true to its core. But how could she ensure that this vision didn't falter in the face of such fierce competition? One of the first things Clara did was call a leadership meeting. She knew that her executives, many of whom had been with the company for years, were the key to steering the ship through this storm. The meeting room was tense, an undercurrent of uncertainty running through every discussion. The team members who had once admired Clara's leadership style now seemed skeptical, unsure if the company's culture of employee-first values could actually compete in such a cutthroat market. Everyone had an opinion about what needed to be done, but no one seemed to agree on the best course of action. Clara stood at the head of the table, her usual calm presence masking the storm of thoughts swirling inside her mind. She had faced crises before, but this one felt different. This time, the stakes were higher than they had ever been. "Thank you all for coming," Clara began, her voice steady, but carrying a quiet intensity. "I know we're all feeling the pressure right now, but I want to remind you of something we've always believed in. Our company is not just a business. It's a community. And that community starts with the people in this room." There was a pause as the team absorbed her words. Clara's gaze swept across the executives. Some were looking at her with genuine curiosity, while others appeared to be unconvinced. "I've heard some of the suggestions," she continued. "And I know there's talk of cutting back on some of the values that have set us apart, like our focus on employee wellness, our dedication to transparency, and the recognition we give to everyone who contributes to this company, not just the high-level execs. But I need to be clear, these values are not negotiable. They are the reason we've built something special here. If we sacrifice them now, we risk losing everything, not just to Horizon Tech, but to what makes us Jennings Industries." Clara paused again, letting her words sink in. There was a murmur around the table, but it was clear that her message had resonated with some. The tension in the room remained, but it was now tempered with the understanding that Clara wasn't going to back down. One of the senior managers, Allison, spoke up, her voice tight with frustration. "Clara, I get that you want to stick to our principles, but have you seen what Horizon Tech is doing? They're cutting prices, ramping up their marketing, and stealing our clients. We can't just keep going along like we've been. We need to adapt, and fast." Clara nodded, her expression softening. "I hear you, Allison, and I'm not blind to the threat. But we're not going to outprice them. We're not going to win this by copying what they're doing. The only way we'll succeed is by doubling down on what makes us different. We need to find our edge, our unique value proposition, and remind the market why they chose us in the first place." There was silence for a moment as everyone mulled over her words. Clara's words had an unexpected effect on the group. They knew she was right. After all, Jennings Industries had never been about just competing on price or simply offering a product. The company had always been about doing things with integrity, with innovation, and with a genuine commitment to its employees and customers. What made them stand apart wasn't something easily replicated by their competitors. But now the question was, how could they take those values and make them a competitive advantage? How could they use their commitment to people, to quality, and to sustainability to differentiate themselves from Horizon Tech's aggressive tactics? Clara's mind was already working as she spoke. "We're going to do this by focusing on 3 things: innovation, customer loyalty, and our people. We're not just going to compete on the same playing field as Horizon Tech. We're going to redefine the playing field. Our first step will be to reimagine our product line, introducing new features and expanding on the values we've always stood for. Next, we're going to launch a loyalty program that doesn't just reward customers for spending more, but for the relationship they've built with us. And people? Allison asked. People, Clara responded with a smile, will remain at the heart of everything we do. We're going to be transparent about where we're going as a company and invite everyone, employees and customers alike, into that conversation. Our company culture will not just survive this challenge, it will thrive because of it. The meeting went on for hours, but slowly, Clara could see the team shifting in their approach. They had all come in uncertain, but by the end of the session, they were united by a common vision, a vision that was anchored in the very principles that Clara had spent decades building. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. Clara and her team worked tirelessly to bring their new strategies to life. They launched an internal communications campaign that invited employees from all levels to participate in the company's vision and contribute their ideas. They reworked the product line to emphasize sustainability and innovation, ensuring that every product wasn't just functional, but also environmentally responsible. The marketing team created compelling campaigns that highlighted not only the quality of the products, but also the company's commitment to its people. By the time the next quarterly review came around, Jennings Industries had not only weathered the storm, but had emerged stronger. While Horizon Tech had stolen a few clients, they hadn't been able to match the deep customer loyalty Jennings had cultivated over the years. More importantly, the company's employees were more engaged than ever. The recognition programs were in full swing, and there was a renewed sense of purpose in the workplace. Clara's vision had been realized. Jennings Industries wasn't just surviving the competition, it was thriving in ways that went far beyond financial success. As Clara stood in the company's lobby that afternoon, watching the employees move about with a renewed energy, she felt a quiet pride. She knew the road ahead would still have its challenges, but for the first time in months, she could finally breathe. She had faced her biggest test as a leader, and had passed it, not by abandoning her principles, but by staying true to them. Jennings Industries was not just a company. It was a testament to the power of leadership grounded in integrity, empathy, and vision. And Clara knew, deep in her heart, that this was only the beginning.